Karina, host of Behind the Pen, and you are watching a very special edition of the show. I have my co-host Wesley Britton. He is a professional reviewer, author, award-winning author of the Beta Earth Chronicles sci-fi collection. And my special guest today is an actor. He is a director, a writer, an author, producer. Have I left anything out? I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Walter Koenig. Welcome to the show, Walter. How are you? It's lovely that you're here with us.
I'm doing okay. I've just come off of two surgeries that have left me slightly incapacitated, but I can still stumble around.
You look wonderful. You really do.
Okay.
So, I want to know, right, we're going back many years now. I was told recently that you were playing a younger character on Star Trek than you actually were. How old were you when you played, when you first started with the...
I played Chekov on Star Trek, yes. I came on the show in 1967. I was 31.
And how old was your character supposed to be?
22.
Ah, you see, because you've made that, you've passed that. There was no problems there. Everyone was saying the same thing. He looks so young. He looks so young. That was awesome. But I mean, did you start your acting career with Star Trek because you were in your 30s? So what were you doing before then?
Well, I did appearances on several television series that unless your audience is at least 50, they probably wouldn't remember. But shows like The Untouchables and Combat and Ben Casey and several others. I played Lee Marvin's son on one show, which was great fun.
And Lieutenant and Twilight Zone, I think.
What's that?
I said, I know you're on the Lieutenant. I think you're on the Twilight Zone.
I was on
no Shatner.
I wasn't on Twilight Zone. I was on the Alfred Hitchcock's.
That's the one.
Yeah, people confused it. They were there. They were on the air at the same time.
Uh-huh.
I've heard. I mean, I'm a young one. I'm young. I'm probably the youngest here. And I heard of The Untouchables, so I get 1 point for that. But yeah, I mean, the people that will be watching this show are going to be fans of the original series of Star Trek. And so back then, they're going to know all of the shows you've been in. So even if I don't, that's no problem there. So how come, this is my first question, how come you weren't in the first episode of Star Trek?
The first episode of Star Trek was the pilot, and the pilot was on the year before, was on in 1966, or maybe even 65. Yes, I was not involved with the show at that point. Jeff Hunter was the lead in the pilot, became a major feature film performer. And I believe played Jesus Christ in a motion picture prior to.
That's right.
Pardon?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and he did not. They wanted to do the idea of Star Trek. They weren't happy. They, being the network, weren't happy with the show that they actually made. They thought it was. I think they thought it was too intellectual, not action oriented. Because I wasn't involved. I'm a little hazy on the reasons. And in any case, they decided to do rather than just cancel it or just put it aside. They decided to do a second pilot. This time they brought in Jeff Hunter. Evidently didn't want to do it, or his wife, I heard, didn't want him to do it. In any case, they brought in Bill Shatner to play the captain. It was a wise choice. He was extremely good in the part.
Yeah.
So that was 1965, 66. 66 was the first season of Star Trek. I came. Then they decided they would like somebody who would appeal to the prepubescent viewer, from 8 to 12 or 14. And I was chosen to be the groovy young
Davy Jones.
And we made up the thing about being 22 because 31 was a little, I think, too old for that age group.
You passed that. I mean, you looked young in the series, so you definitely didn't look your age. That's good to know that there was 2 pilots. Can you imagine if they just gave up after the first pilot? What would have happened? It's like there would have been no original cast, no original series. Then there would have been no films, and then there would have been no
everything
discovery,
else,
everything. If it wasn't for the first show, the first season, if it wasn't for the first cast, the merchandise, the cult following that you have, the fan base. Oh, I went on to have a look at your fan base, just yours alone. How many places there were that just admire you and just for Walter, his own fan base, loads, absolutely loads.
Well, they achieved their goal. The fan mail I got was indeed from very young people, mostly writing in pencil on lined paper. But that's life in general, and certainly that's the history of Star Trek in particular. The world is capricious, and you cannot predict what's going to happen. And certainly in a business as mercurial and changing in nature as television and television series, things sometimes go the way you anticipate, and more frequently something happens and you never find out why they changed course, but suddenly it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
So that's our show is sort of the epitome of that kind excuse me, of that kind of business. When we were canceled in 1969, we thought that was it. We were done. What's going to happen the rest of our lives? And as a matter of fact, for a year and a half, nothing. I started writing to keep me sane because I had no other reason to get up in the morning. There was no phone calls, no inquiries, demands for whatever talent I have to appear in on television anywhere else. So so it's a strange business. You've got to love it. You got to, in order to stick with it for it's I'm 84, at 54. I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
But that's what I tell young people. I say, you ask me how do you get into the business, and it's not a matter of so much of getting in. It's just holding on. Just waiting and keep working at it, and you got to keep trying. And discouragement and disillusionment, which is part of your it could just as well be the socks you wear, because you're always dealing with it's always something that you have to overcome. So that's what I tell folks. I tell them, you got to just hang in there. And if it's meant to be, and sometimes that's not true. If it's meant to be, it'll happen. No, that's not true. I've known lots of young actors when I was a young actor some of them were extremely talented, and I never heard of them again.
Yeah, it's a lot about who you know in the business, isn't it? Not just how good you are, it's who you know.
There's this thing that happens. It's if you're going to use a cliche, it's more being in the right place at the right time. Yeah.
Oh, Mark Cushman. He's the author of the
yeah, we're good friends.
Yeah, the Voyages of
right.
Yeah, he came on and we talked about how he got hold of all the memos and episodes and scripts that never made an episode, and also the ratings that people were lied about, saying that the show was cancelled because of low ratings when they had the actual ratings in front of them, and how controversial some of the episodes were according to the network, and so that was
well, that was the whole motivation for Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek. He wanted to create a show that would take issue with some of the more controversial socio-political the environment, the socio-political environment at the time, when most television series would not engage in controversial issues, that stayed out. They didn't talk about Vietnam, and they stayed out of circumstances, situations where they might lose part of their audience who didn't agree with them. But Gene was very
he's very adamant.
Yeah, he was very adamant and very vociferous, and he stuck by his guns. And as a consequence, there was lots of contentious conversation between Gene Roddenberry and the network. But and the network was trying to get rid of the show, and that's what Mark was referring to, is that they were complaining that our ratings were too low. And evidently, they were doctoring those ratings. They were totally acceptable. In fact, we were second in almost every time slot we had during the 3 years we were on the series. So I don't have to repeat this, Marcus. I'm sure I told you all of this. But there you are again. You know, the show probably should have gone 7 years.
Definitely.
But the folks at the networks, you know, it's true that, well, let me put it to you this way. When I started writing for television, I would come up with an idea and I get the go ahead to do an outline and then a first draft. And the producers would call me and say, we got it. And what do you think of it? They would ask me, what do I think of what I've written? It's wonderful. It's the most brilliant thing.
As every author would say.
The reason they asked that, and I'm sure they asked that of every writer, because they didn't know. They didn't know if it was good or bad. You know, before becoming producers, they weren't apprentice producers. They weren't assistant producers. They came from the mail room. You know, they were sorting mail, and then suddenly, you know, that's not true in every case, but certainly there is a case to be made for the fact that they were very inexperienced. Many people who were in executive positions, in positions of responsibility. So yeah, so the people at the networks were nervous. They thought we would fail. They thought the show was still too intellectual, ad nauseum, all the reasons they were giving for not wanting to do Star Trek. Bless his heart, Gene Roddenberry was very determined.
Very.
And he got the 3 years, but of course we didn't get any more because of the things I said. And Mark, I'm sure, was able to give you much more information than I can, because he's done so much research.
Wow.
He has so many books out.
Yes.
Yeah, that deal with that, and they're fascinating reading. So
most definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get to some very strange fan questions. Okay, this one's from Francis Lalande. He says, does being a writer help or hinder you as a director?
Good question.
Well, the only directing I did was I directed on stage. I directed theater. Sure. When you look at the script when you're the director and you make choices and you decide if it's well structured, if the characters relate to each other, if it is not, does the dialogue sound natural? Their objectives, what they're there for, how they fit into the story structure, and what we were trying to, what they're trying to say, and how truthful they are. And after we did Star Trek I, and Gene was kind of eased out of the motion picture part of things, we had a new producer come in, Harv Bennett, and Mark may not have, in what you've read or what you've heard from him, you might not have gotten that far as the movies, but he has books on the movies, the Star Trek movies as well. But what was I going to say?
About the new director.
Oh, yeah. So I got a copy of this, an early edition of Star Trek II, and I read it and I was aghast. There was a violation of the most basic writing tenet that goes with being a writer of any kind, and that is, with very few exceptions, you don't kill off one of the stars of the story in the second act. That's
well, I don't know. I mean, some writers do.
No, you don't do that. We had 3 ionic symbols in our stories, which was Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and the Enterprise. And if you're going to do away with one of those entities, you better make it
the Enterprise.
The theatrical ending, the most dynamic, captivating story element that you have in your story. You don't kill off the lead, and then you suddenly are dealing with secondary characters who you don't have the vested interest that you do as the people who are doing leads. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were really loved. Their male reflected it. These were the people you're going to focus on. So I told him, you can't kill off Spock in the second act. That's the way they had it. I said, I know you've heard this already. He says, no, I haven't, which I found bizarre.
Oh, wow.
Bizarre that nobody else had picked up on that. But he was impressed enough by my adamancy, my determination, that he took it to heart. They rewrote it, and they wrote Spock dying in the third act. And then he asked me,
him.
Or until the end of the movie.
No, it couldn't have gone to film. It couldn't. I can't believe that it would have ever have gone to film. Somebody would have had to know that you can't do that. In any case, he then asked me to do what he called a tricky run on the script and find out what else was wrong.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, well, it was to his advantage, because even though he had watched all 79 episodes, which certainly is to his credit, Harv Bennett, as the new producer, there were still little things that we wouldn't say, that were in the script. So I pointed those out, and they were incorporated. And at that juncture, we had a script that was consistent with the TV series.
Awesome.
That acknowledged the fact that 10 years had transpired, but was certainly an extremely good story with Ricardo Montalban playing the adversary and Bill playing the protagonist. They were great because they were very, very strong characters. We all know Captain Kirk, but the trap in story writing is the villain, is the antagonist, because it's frequently presented sort of a two-dimensional character, and just very powerful but scary, and doesn't have to even be human,
Wrath of Khan, no, exactly.
Well, Ricardo was human, but we've done others.
Genetically engineered, but a human, yeah.
Yeah. In Star Trek 3, we had a Klingon as the bad guy. So, which was more in keeping with the conventional idea of the bad guy. But in any case, I thought Star Trek 2 with Ricardo playing the antagonist was a great choice, and he was a delightful human being. He was a real gentleman. He had been a star in movies. It did not reflect itself in his ego, because he was a very amicable actor who was very professional, very much prepared to listen to suggestions and to act on them. So it was a terrific script. I had a nice part. I generally didn't have roles that were as engaging. So I think your question was something about Star Trek 2. I get carried.
Okay, Brett A. Harris says that you wrote a graphic novel. He says that you wrote a graphic novel. So what was this graphic novel about?
Oh, it was about vampires.
Oh, so was mine. I wrote a graphic novel about vampires.
Really?
Yeah.
Mine was about how they came to be, how vampires came to be at the very beginning. And I thought it was pretty good. I had a really good artist doing the drawing. I had a terrible, terrible publisher who did nothing. Did nothing to promote it. That's
nothing new.
Been there, done that.
Pardon?
I was saying, been there, done that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm sure most of us have. But it was very satisfying doing it, to seeing it evolve, and finished it and got it produced. And it must have had a very, very small audience, because I never got a lot of email about it.
It's funny that we both did that. What did you call yours? What did you call your graphic novel?
God, you shouldn't have asked me that. It was. Can you hold on 1 second?
Google for it. And I just read it this morning. Nothing gobble, but I read the name of it.
Oh, the graphic novel.
Yeah, if you go to, I went to his Amazon author page, because he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 publications.
Okay, so this is called Things to Come. It was inspired by H.G. Wells, and this This is my graphic novel.
Wow, mine was called Bloodlust. So quite obvious for a vampire. Let's get on with another question. Eric Klein once said, which did you enjoy playing more, Mr. Chekov or Mr. Bester? And someone else said, and asked another question, many of your fans think that Bester was one of the best, greatest sci-fi characters ever. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't feel bad. I have at least as big an ego as the other guy, probably bigger. No, I loved playing Mr. Bester on Babylon 5. That was an extraordinarily satisfying experience. I loved working with everybody on the show. The executive producer, J. Michael Straczynski, wrote almost all of the scripts, which is an extraordinary achievement. The character, whenever he appeared, I wasn't an every week character, but I over the course of 5 seasons, I was on 12 episodes. But each time I was on in a part that the story focused on. It was an instrumental character. So, and quite different. Of course, I was 15 years older than I was when I played Chekov, maybe 20 years older, and maybe 30 years older. But anyway, yeah, that was great. I love doing it, if for no other reason, and there are other reasons, if for no other reason, then at least to show that I had some range, that I wasn't limited to playing.
They absolutely loved you as Bester. Yeah, no, they loved you, Bester. Yeah, quoted one of the best sci-fi characters ever.
Actually, they had a couple of contests or something, and Bester was chosen from I don't know 80,000, 100,000 people who wrote in as the character they most love to hate.
Hi everyone, I'm Karina Kantas, your host for Behind the Pen. I am an award-winning author of 14 books. I'm a podcaster, YouTuber. I have my own radio show on the Artist First radio network called Author Assist, and I also run Author Assist, which helps independent authors with their promotion and marketing. Today is a very special episode of Behind the Pen. I have a co-host with me, Wesley Britton, who will be taking over for the second half of this episode. So sit back and enjoy.
Anyway, hello, people and fans and all the ships at sea. This is Wes Britton taking over the podcast. And now I'm sitting here with Walter, finally, with questions that I've been trying to ask really for a year, because it was last year in the middle of the summer that I reviewed his most recent book. And I say most recent because he's written his 2 autobiographies. He's written some other books as well that I think he talked a little about with Karina, including his graphic novel. But I am here to talk about his book. And first I want to say this is really our 3rd conversation, Walter. The first one I'm sure you don't remember. That was the Star Trek convention. And your talk to me was not very memorable, considering one of the fans that was a real pesty was getting on your nerves. Don't blame you. Second time around was you came on a radio show that I used to co-host, and was interviewing Mark Cushman for one of his earlier Star Trek books. I don't remember which one anymore. It was like my 2nd or 3rd interview with Mark, because I've reviewed all his books from I Spy On, and he brought you along on that particular episode. So I'm guessing that was probably his 2nd volume of These Are the Voyages. But we talked about a number of things on that. In fact, you told an anecdote there that I prompted you from the Star Trek convention, and you didn't think anybody would know what you were talking about. You were doing your impression of Catherine Hepburn that you did on the set of, I believe it was Star Trek 4. Yeah, one that Leonard Nimoy was directing. But I want to get past Star Trek, because you talked with Karina about that for a while. I want to talk to you about your book, and first ask you the question I've been waiting for a year. When I have read your book all the way through from start to finish, I had the serious impression you were having a good time writing that book. I'm guessing you really enjoyed the process of writing. Am I right?
Well, it's writing a biography, an autobiography, is really, I think, probably the simplest kind, or the easiest kind of writing, in a couple of regards. I mean, structurally, I just laid it out in chronological order for the first edition of it. I wandered a little bit when we republished, and I added the last 20 years. But yeah, it was fun. You know, my memory is really good from about 2018 back. It's the last couple of years. I
understand, yeah.
Yeah. So the creative process is only in terms of structuring the words, because the memories are quite clear, and particularly the bad ones. I have a wonderful capacity for imprinting those in my cerebral cortex and having them available whenever I need to feel bad.
But you still, how about the process itself, not just the content, but the sitting down and doing it? Did you enjoy that process?
Yeah, I do. I do. I even enjoy the process of writing nonfiction. Unfortunately, I don't appear to be as adept at writing nonfiction as no. I got it backwards. I'm more adept at nonfiction than I am fiction. And I have a novel that I've been working on, and I start and I stop, and I start and I stop, and it's a little the story is complicated and the structure is complicated, and I don't know if I'm getting. And I keep saying I'm going to give it to somebody to read. And I only gave it to Mark and Mark Cushman, and he was very generous. So I don't know if I trust what he had to say. But in any event, that's a little tougher, but more exciting, because if I can bring to the printed page something at least nominally unusual and unfamiliar, and make and capture my audience with it, then I feel like writing that kind of writing is really great. But it's also agonizing. I'm not always sure that I'm doing a good job. So that's exactly where I am now. I'm writing a fiction, a novel. It's really kind of complicated. I have each chapter is written by a different voice.
I did that.
I mean, they're all me, but it's a different style in each chapter. And I don't know. And I want to say, how dare you think you can do this when you're just writing in one voice is difficult. And here I'm trying to, because each chapter is it's an entity unto itself, although they all come together ultimately, but each chapter is like a mini story, and I'm doing them in different voices and
different characters, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really address who the character is. Oh, I do in one case, because I do it in the first person, but in the other is I just, because the chapters are a little strange, the voices are a little strange, so I don't know if I can. I'm 84, for God's sakes. I don't know I can finish this anytime soon. So, but that, and with the coronavirus, That's pretty much my life.
How far along are you? Third of the way, halfway through?
No, I'm about 60 pages.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Well, when you get to the point where you would like some beta readers, let me know.
Okay, I'll do that.
Unlike Mark, I know Mark does not like to read fiction. At least he's told me that a number of times. Maybe that's just his way of not having to read my stuff. But anyway, yeah, I'd be curious about that. Let me know down the road when you get to a point where you want some people to read it.
Okay.
Well, one thing else I wanted to ask you about, I've had this question for a year, is I know that Star Trek fans and Babylon 5 fans are going to be the first primary audience you're going to reach simply because of what you did as an actor. I like the whole book. I think the one thing that really makes it stand out is the whole story of being the inside in Hollywood and all of the ways you had to go through to get to where you did get to, and all of the triumphs and all of the falls and all of the different directions you took. And it seems like you had a lot of appreciation for your stage work. What do you say to pull in readers who might not be Star Trek fans to make them think this would be a book worth their time?
I'm not sure there are any that
Oh,
read
no.
my book. Okay, let's assume there are some non-Star Trek fans who've read the book. What I hope they get out of it is a feeling of candor. I'm pretty honest about what I write. I'm not bitter.
No.
I don't take this as an opportunity, as a vehicle to come down on people. I make a couple of jokes about a couple of cast members, but I don't think there's anything that's really mean in my book. You're not going to get a tell-all story that would embarrass anybody or make them feel alienated.
Well, it's a very positive book, I think.
Oh, good. Yeah. So you get to know a little bit about Hollywood, how it works.
And changes in the industry over the decades.
Yes, thank you. You want to co-write
Well, I do better at fiction than non. Well, no, that's not true. My nonfiction books are probably better. I don't know. I won't say. But
have you been published?
Yes.
Oh, who published your books and what were the titles?
Well, the first three were by Prager publishers. They were nonfiction on spy TV and spy movies, spy television, Beyond Bond, Spies in Fiction and Film, and then On Screen and Undercover. And then I went over to Bear Manor Media, and they did my Encyclopedia of TV Spies. And by that point, I was sick to death of spies. So that's when I flipped over into science fiction, and I've been working on my Beta Earth Chronicles ever since. And book 8 just came out on the 22nd.
Oh, good.
So it keeps going. And I tried to get Mark to read one and maybe get a review out of him. No, I don't read fiction. Well, okay. I've reviewed every blessed one of his books, and they never end.
Did you ever extrapolate from television series and write a book about a series that was on the air?
No, I've never written a book like that. I hadn't even thought about it, to be honest. That sounds like something down your alley, to be honest. And that was another question I wanted to ask. When I was looking over your book titles, there was, of course, 2 autobiographies, version 1 and then version 2. And then I noticed one that I knew the title of earlier this afternoon before we had all these strange technological issues. What were the other books that you have published? The graphic novel?
The graphic novel is called Things to Come.
Yeah.
And that's the title is borrowed from Wells.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I wrote a kind of satiric fantasy science fiction thing called Buck Alice and the Actor Robot.
That's the one I was going to ask you about. I never heard of that one. What's the story there?
The story there there's a backstory that should be summarize in as few words as possible. I had, like all the other Star Trek actors, there came a point when the umbilical cord was severed, and it was severed rather brutally. Hello, Walter, this is Gene Roddenberry. We've been canceled. Hope to work with you again sometime. So that's the backstory. I woke up every morning thereafter wondering, what am I going to do with this day? And it got to be a couple of months of having no direction, not having any idea of what the day would bring, and that quite possibly it wouldn't bring anything. And then I finally said, I've got to have some goals, something, that I can look forward to, that I can incorporate in my life, that'll give me some structure and some sense of purpose. And I said, I'm going to write a novel. And I sat down. I didn't outline it. I didn't characterize in advance the characters who were going to be in it, the relationships. I just started writing. And curiously, in some kind of bizarre way, it came together. It came together with a beginning, a middle, and an end. In fact, one guy recently said to me that I read your book and I was halfway through. I was so damn sure that you couldn't finish this.
Oh, you have little faith.
Yeah, because there was so much going on, so many characters. I had too many characters. I had about 30 characters in this, but I brought them all together, and I had an ending that was a real ending. It wasn't like and then they woke up, or something. And I had a good time writing it. But what happened was I showed it to 3 people in advance of trying to get it published. All 3 were writers. All 3 wrote for Star Trek. George Clayton Johnson was one of them. I don't know if you remember George, but he wrote several episodes of the series, as well as Twilight Zone and other things. Another one is Shimon Winselberg. I never thought I'd remember that. He was a very, very good writer who had a play on Broadway called Kataki with Hayakawa, whatever is, can't remember. And they both liked it. They both thought it would be published, and they were very pleased for me. The third writer I started to was a much closer friend. At least he was until he read it. That was Harlan Ellison, who you probably...
He is a cranky cuss anyway, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, and he hated it. He absolutely hated it. You can't hate anything more than if it was somebody who had murdered your children. Well, that's the way I felt. I felt like he murdered my child because he hated it so much, my book being my child. So I stuck it in the drawer, and it sat there for 18 years. And then for some reason, I took it out. Somebody was curious about it, and they read it, and they gave it to the editor of a small publishing company, and they wanted to publish it. And they did, and they gave me a very modest stipend for publishing it. And that ran out. The contract ran out, and it became mine again. But in the meantime, to make a long story at least a little less boring, it was
not boring.
It was picked up by another publisher with a little bit more credentials, authentic credentials. They published it, didn't do very well. That contract expired, picked up by a third publisher, all young people, in their late 20s, 30s, and each one had their own publishing company. And that got published, and I'm still getting, royalties, $1.50, $2.50. So they're still publishing. They still have it anyway, and So I probably have, I hold the record for the most publishing of a book that sold the least number of copies. So it was fun. It kept me sane at a time when I had nothing else going on. Nobody was calling me for jobs as an actor. I had something to do every day. I had a purpose in my life, and I enjoyed the process. So that's what Book Alice is about.
Have you ever considered doing an audio book version of it?
I did it. I did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, my wife and I went. We were invited by a gentleman who produced audio dramas, and he thought it would be a. You know where this is going by my first question.
Oh, yeah.
It was going to be a great success. We went back to the Boston area. It wasn't Boston itself. It was another little town outside of Boston. It was very charming. We hired about 25 actors, professional actors, to play the roles. I carried the narration, and everybody else did characters in the story. And it was, what is the one that's it's not broadcast, it's broadcast up in the air. It's bounces off a, oh, what the hell is it called?
Talking about online radio?
Yeah, it's an online radio thing. It's the one with
streaming.
Which one?
You mean streaming?
I don't know what streaming is, really.
Sirius Radio?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Who are you?
I just chirp in when necessary. Never mind me. Go back to work.
You give us a big help there.
So they, you know, he loved it. I heard it, and I thought, this is not going to work. It's so long. It was like they sold it first as an audio DVD.
Yeah.
It was at least 6 hours.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's not bad for book.
I got about halfway through it, and I said, I can't listen to any more of this. So we lost contact. He had it on that system, but I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, so I don't know what happened. But yeah, to answer your question in as convoluted and as roundabout way as I possibly can, indeed, it went to radio.
Now you had another book there. It was Chekov's something. I forget the full title.
Well, that was Chekov's Enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first book I wrote, and I actually wrote that while making the first Star Trek movie. I mean, I sat in my dressing room when I wasn't on stage, and it's very authentic and was very much to the moment because I was writing each day about what was happening. That was pretty successful. That was it was determined that was entertaining. It's fun to read, and it sold pretty well. The only thing was that Gene Roddenberry's secretary was also writing a book about the making of the movie, and it wasn't nearly as interesting as mine because it was just press notices that she had extrapolated from magazines and newspapers, and pretty much gave a very dry account of the making of the movie. I think mine was far more interesting.
Your personality came through it like it did to your latest book. It would be.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and I think it did. So yeah. So I did that on the set, and it came out. Oh, so the point is, my point was that the secretary book, as I said, was very dry and very and there was, and she wasn't on the set, and she was in her office, and she was writing this. So that's where she got her material. She got it from magazines and newspapers, and but she was his secretary. So they were going to issue my book in around Christmas, which would have been a great stocking stuffer. But she had a little
inside track.
Yeah, she had a pull. So they pulled my book and didn't release it until March or April, and it didn't have the same audience it would have had. So anyway, that's I think that's all the books.
Yeah, that's all. Well, I really wanted to have a lot of time talking to you about your writing background, because I know people pester you to death about Star Trek and even about Bester. So I wanted to look into other sides. So Walter Koenig, speaking of other sides in your book, I'm reading some memory farts as we go along. You really seem to be very proud of your time with stage work, aren't you?
Well, I think it's the most satisfying. It's most rewarding and satisfying. And generally, when I did a play, I was substantially involved in it. If I wasn't playing the lead, I was playing a very good role. So I had something to do. I had work that I had to do in developing the character, whatever it was. I played Scrooge, and I don't know. Some people seem to take Christmas Carol as just a light child's, work. I mean, the audience was very young, but it's Dickens, for God's sakes. It's beautifully written, and Scrooge is on the stage the entire time. He never leaves the stage. So I had a great time doing that. I did a play called White House Murder Case, which was a very dark comedy, and that was quite successful. I did Steam Bath, where I played a Puerto Rican towel attendant who was actually God, and he is doing his godly stuff from the steam bath. He's calling people, or whoever he's calling. I don't think we ever established that. And he tells them who's going to die and how they should die. It's, again, dark comedy, but
very
a lot of fun to do and well received. So there are a bunch of plays. I did a play called I did a play called Night Must Fall, which was a melodrama, which I played a psychopathic killer who carries around a woman's head in a hat box, which was terrific. It was fun. I mean, you don't see the head, it's the play, and that was a great cast. We did it in a small theater. It was successfully received. I did a play with Mark Leonard. I don't know if you know who Mark Leonard is, but
yes, Eric.
Yeah, he played Spock's father. He's a terrific actor. We did the Boys in Summer, about Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer getting together like 40 years later, and they each have a secret that they ultimately reveal, but it takes them a long time to get around to it. But again, it was a great fun. Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster took it on the road, and they took it to San Francisco, and were going to go on to, this was obviously before us, and they were going to go on to New York. But the material, I guess, was the material that was, I don't know what the approach was, or what the criticisms were, but they decided not to pursue it. So it didn't get past San Francisco. They didn't want any, I remember hearing that they didn't want any reviewers there, but one snuck in, one didn't like it, and they abandoned the project. And George C. Scott did it in New York before any of us did, and I think he did a very good job. playing.
It's called The Boys of Summer.
Boys of Summer, yeah.
And I thought I knew all the media adaptations of Mark Twain's characters.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's worth reading, certainly. And we had standing room only. We had a small house. We had standing room only, and we took it on the road. Did it at conventions, and several conventions, and at a couple of colleges. We did it at one theater in Pennsylvania that seated about 200, and we did it at another theater, I think in Hershey, that seated 2,000. So it was an amazing time and great fun. And Mark was so good as Huckleberry Finn. It was.
I'm trying to picture that.
Yeah.
You guys have such an age disparity, and Huck and Tom were pretty much the same age.
Yeah, I don't think it was that obvious. I don't think this disparity was that great. I am 84.
Yeah.
You know? So I was in my late 50s, early 60s when we did that. 50s, I guess. This is all, quite a time after Star Trek.
Yeah. 84. Does that mean you're done doing stuff, or you?
Not my choice. Not my choice. I'm here. I'm ready. I think I can still memorize lines. I am working on this book, this novel, but I'm only 55, 60 pages into it, and I wake up some mornings and think this is really worth pursuing, and then there are days when I reread what I've written and I think this just doesn't make it. It's interesting concepts, and I really do believe that, but I'm not sure that I really executed them as well as they should be if it's going to be professionally published material. So I'm still battling with that.
Did you feel like that with your autobiography?
No. First of all, I know I had a built-in audience.
Yeah.
And they're rooting for me,
Yes.
And I generally, I don't recall any bad reviews for the first autobiography. The second one, which is the first one plus the last 20 years, is I'm still getting reports. It hasn't been out there that long.
Right, since last summer, yeah.
Yes, it seems to be reasonably successful. So I don't know.
Well, I read some of the reviews that you did a lot of revising of the first version, more speed and all of that. How much revising did you do of your original autobiography?
No, I didn't do any.
Oh, okay. Then the reviews are wrong.
I just added the second part, and we republished the whole thing.
That's 20.
Pardon?
I was going to say, there's 100 other pages. There's no Star Trek there. So this is really for those who want to learn about you and, I say, Hollywood.
Yeah, that's true. That's quite true. There's a lot about that. I think your partner asked me that. Of course, I don't remember things that happened 2 hours ago, and with any confidence. I remember things that happened 50 years ago. I'm really good with the old days, the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. I'm really sharp with that. The other stuff I got to fight for. Ultimately, I think I filled it with stories that are entertaining and are true. Somebody recently asked me on an interview if everything I wrote was true, or was it embellished? Because the style of writing doesn't, I try to make it entertaining. It's not, it's not Burns' documentary. It's Walter Koenig and how he thinks. And
thank you to everyone who watched the show. I hope you enjoyed this very special edition of Behind the Pen. I'd like to thank Walter for taking his time to join us, and for Wesley being a fantastic co-host. So until next time, bye for now.